Now, our keynote speaker is not just a great political practitioner, though he is. He's one of the most brilliant journalists of our time, and he is the spin doctor's spin doctor. He's also an important writer. He's a great diarist and a writer of novels. But finally, he has become that very 21st century thing on all of the crucial issues of our time, whether it's mental health or the nightmare of Brexit. As editor of The New European, and in all of the campaigning work that he has done, including using his bagpipes. And didn't you create a football chant about Boris Johnson as well? Yeah. Alastair Campbell has become one of our great campaigners. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Alastair Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, thanks for that. Stole some of my lines, but not all of them. And I do see from social media that some of you seem to think I'm going to give you all the answers to our multifarious political problems, and I admire your trust and apologise in advance if I disappoint. It's true that I helped Tony win through 3 elections, but I also helped Gordon and then Ed against Cameron. Jeremy didn't ask me. I was with Remain over Leave, with Hillary over Trump. More happily, I did help Macron a little, but only after working with President Hollande up to the point where he hit 4% approval, which is exactly the same figure you get if you ask the question, do you think Elvis Presley is alive? So do not look to me for universal wisdom, but you will always get frankness. And if I'm being frank, we're not doing very well. Certainly, if Thursday's elections are anything to go by, we, the Labour Party, are a very long way from where we need to be to get back into Downing Street. And frankly, if we cannot beat this shambles of a Tory party, we don't deserve to be in the game. Now, in saying we, I'm assuming, this is progress, that we're all progressives. We're motivated by justice, by liberty, by changing society for the better, by generating wealth but sharing it fairly, and by a belief that where you get in life should not be dependent upon your background. We are democratic socialists. We are broadly, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can have an argument outside, anti-Brexit. We are broadly anti-populism and nationalism, anti-Putin's populist nationalist authoritarianism, which Trump seems to be trying to emulate. We are pro-science in the debate on climate change. We were very pro-social media when it started. Now we wonder whether the authoritarians and the populists are using it better than the progressives. We wonder whether Mark Zuckerberg is less a force for the good of connectivity than a particularly geeky new media oligarch. And what with the possible illegal funding of the referendum campaign, breaches of data law, Cambridge Analytica, foreign interference, we worry that we lost not just to liars and charlatans, but to crooks as well. It's quite something to be the person constantly associated with so-called spin. I must confess to complete amateur status compared with Trump's tweets, Putin's propaganda machinery, Aaron Banks's UKIP, Boris Johnson's big red bus, or even Momentum's relentless messaging about their heroic role in the onward march to guaranteed victory for Jeremy. It's often said that the crisis in modern politics is one of trust. But just step back and look at Trump, Putin, and Brexit in the context of a dictionary definition of trust. A firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. Take £350 million a week for the health service. A straightforward lie. The chief liar, instead of being disgraced, promoted to Foreign Secretary. In the US, the liar-in-chief, now commander-in-chief. Trump did or said so many things that would frankly have destroyed candidates of either side in a previous era. There's a book about Russia, Nothing is True, Everything is Possible, by a guy called Peter Pomerantsev. It's about how Putin cemented power. Easier in a phony democracy where you can control parliament and media, get them to believe that the UK staged a chemical weapons attack in Syria or in Salisbury. But Trump plays the same game. Reporters who criticise aren't reporters, they're liars. Government officials who speak truth unto power are traitorous slimeballs, believe nothing but the Trump tweets. And it all becomes, day by day, normalised. So love trumps hate, goes the slogan. But does it? The haters won. Because, it would seem, feeling trumps reason, lies trump logic, simple messages trump complex realities. Wide open for an electoral model based on anger and fear. Anger at globalisation, which has helped some more than others. Anger at elites. And it's Trump, the billionaire inherited wealth businessman, Johnson, the old Etonian, Farage, the city trader, Le Pen, the daughter of a dynasty, who pump this stuff out. It would be incredible if it wasn't happening. Key to the anger is the global crash. The feeling that the people who caused it got away with it and the people who didn't have had to pay a price, creating the first generation of parents to fear they will not give their kids a better life than they had. Now, the bad news is that this has all changed so quickly. But that is the good news too. Not that things can change back to something that went before, because the past, especially the imagined past of nostalgics, left or right, is not repeatable. That is why many Brexit supporters ultimately are headed for awful disappointment, as are Benite hero worshippers convinced that nationalisation and tax and spend are the answer to all our challenges. The good news is that change to something different can come, provided we work for it. Now, it could be that change just accelerates in the wrong direction to a genuinely dark period in history. There are, frankly, too many parallels with the 30s. The aftermath of a crash, the rejection of expert opinion in favour of prejudice, the increase in nationalism and nativism, the othering of minorities, the rise of the strongman leader, President Xi, Erdogan, Orban, Duterte, Putin the poster boy, collecting useful idiots from left and right, democracies beginning to question democracy itself as slow, tired, indecisive, incapable of making change. And we, on the progressive side of politics, have to do some very, very hard soul-searching at how in Britain it's a party of the left and not the right that has become even remotely associated with anti-Semitism. So let's just go through all of those we's. Progressive against anti-progressive in the party. Are we winning or losing? Well, we know who the leader is. We know who has the key posts and the numbers and the momentum at many local meetings. Labour v Tory. With a government this incompetent, this divided, this weakly led, this inhumane, failing so evidently on the key challenges, I cannot get my head around anyone in the Labour Party being content when looking at the state of public opinion, or putting failure on Thursday down to poor expectation management, not the fact that huge swathes of the country refuse to countenance this Labour Party in power. Battle of ideas. The last election, frankly, felt like a battle between two competing visions of the past, the 70s or the 50s. with little to match the sheer scale of challenge facing both the country and the world. On Brexit, I go up and down. I absorb the constant exhortations from people to keep going and trying to stop it, and I feel enthused that we can turn things around. Then I watch the news, and I'm down again, with most MPs seemingly planning to facilitate Brexit while saying to themselves they know it's a disaster. Government pursuing a policy it knows will make the country worse off. Labour, with its most left-wing leader ever, refusing properly to oppose a policy being driven by the hard right, which will do the greatest damage to the weakest. Now, I accept the politics are very, very difficult. The UK has never been in a situation where there was a huge national referendum in favour of something that most MPs thought a bad idea. And we can't just wish away the result, nor the factors behind it. But I do believe the argument for a change of course can be won and be the basis for an increase, not a drop, in support for Labour. Because people want leadership, they want explanation of what's happening in the world, and they want decisions for the long term taken, not ducked. And that is why I do so strongly support those MPs and peers on both sides prepared to fight so hard for what they believe at the risk of being labelled traitors and saboteurs. And it's why I deplore the fact that under Jeremy Corbyn, so proud of his rebellious past, many do not even treat Brexit now on its merits, but rather through the absurd reduction of every single issue as a judgment on him and his leadership. So, are we really going to trust the Brexit extremists on this? When so many lies were told, promises broken, laws on funding and data seemingly broken too, when we know how the cost will be, the damage to our economy, our standing in the world, our young generations overwhelmingly demanding that change of course. No, we can't trust them. So we have to fight. We cannot give in to this fatalism, because I, for one, do not trust this government to get a good deal, when in place of specifics, they give nothing but wishful slogans. And I do not yet trust this Parliament to do the right thing for the country, and that is why I back the People's Vote campaign to give the people a say on the final Brexit deal. It's also why I back the campaign launched here today for a meaningful vote at Labour Conference, www.laboursay.eu, and why I urge you all to subscribe to the New European, because if our sales keep going at the rate that they are, and the males keep diving at the rate that they are, I will still be alive when we overtake them. And if you want to find the grounds for opposing Brexit, just remember the tests. I'll remind you of Mrs May's. 1, having the exact same benefits out of the single market and the customs union. Not happening. 2, no hard border in Ireland. Parked. Insoluble. 3, free trade agreement fully negotiated by March 2019. Not happening. 4, no payment for access to the EU market. 40 billion and counting. 5, a complete end to EU rules and regulations, not happening. 6, continuation of all EU trade deals and new deals ready to come into force the day we leave. Not happening. Liam Fox's fantasy. Then there's Labour's tests. Does it ensure a strong and collaborative future relationship with the EU? Well, it will certainly be weaker and less collaborative, that is for sure. Does it deliver the exact same benefits, same as the Tories? No. Does it ensure the fair management of migration in the interests of the economy and communities? Well, after Windrush, would we trust this lot to deal with the rights of EU migrants here and UK migrants there? Does it defend rights and protections and prevent a race to the bottom? The race to the bottom is what the Tory right wants. Does it protect national security and our capacity to tackle cross-border crime? Not according to anyone who works products in that field. Does it deliver for all regions and nations of the UK? No, and the government impact assessment papers make that perfectly clear. If those tests are to mean anything, Labour cannot support Mrs May's Brexit, even what is already agreed, and frankly, nor can Mrs May support Mrs May's tests. If those tests are not met and we still go through with it, then though the Tories will be seen as Brexit's architect, Labour will be its bricklayer, and history very, very harsh when the house comes tumbling down. Indeed, I think the Brexit gamble, which the leadership seem to think may win them an election, could be a deciding factor in what loses it for them. You cannot face both ways forever. As Theresa May is finding in leadership, you have to decide. Now, the Labour leadership for the last election, they took our many not the few slogan, though in their loathing of New Labour, they apparently say it's a different vintage of many not the few. But let me try out another bastardised Blairite soundbite. Tough on Brexit, tough on the causes of Brexit. If we judge that Brexit is going to be bad for Britain, get tough, fight it. But get tough too on the reasons behind it. Not by rerunning arguments of the past, but by shaping new ideas for the future. A real industrial strategy for dealing with economic inequality, regional inequality, the shortage of affordable housing, for those communities feeling left behind. Recognise the fears of change, yes, including concerns about immigration, but not by aping the rhetoric or the ideas of the right. Now, I said I would be frank, and frankly, I'm finding life and politics very tough right now. I've been lucky enough to be on the winning side of arguments a lot of my life in politics, but today, whether on Brexit, Labour v Tory, the direction of the Labour Party, the spread of populism, it doesn't feel like that anymore. I'm also a very, very tribal person. Short of Putin and Assad leading a consortium to buy Burnley and installing Boris Johnson as chairman and Rees-Mogg as manager, nothing will ever challenge my football tribalism. But my lifelong Labour tribalism is being pushed to the limit by the return of militant-style nastiness in local politics, by my utter revulsion at the anti-Semitism, by my feeling that some in the leadership feel much greater animus towards other Labour supporters than they do to Tories, by seeing in powerful positions people whose self-indulgence did so much damage to the party in Neil Kinnock's era, by seeing how badly good people working for the party have been treated, by, frankly, the paucity of new ideas and thoughtful debate, by dreadful complacency about what it takes to win, by foreign policy positions that have been a mix of naive and dangerous, because in presenting the hard left view as Labour's own, that the West is usually wrong and those opposed to the West are either right, or if they did something wrong, it was because we provoked them, so what do we expect? We end up with the leadership desperate to doubt that the Russians were responsible for Salisbury or that Assad gassed his own people. And do not underestimate the damage that did in the local elections as well. And it is the same kind of politics that allows anti-Semitism, because Israel is seen as an oppressor, and therefore Jewish people cannot really be victims. The point is not just that this worldview is wrong and deprives Assad and Putin and others responsibility for their actions, but also the Corbyn project is constantly being sold to us as returning Labour to its roots, when in truth this is a massive departure, utterly foreign to the Labour tradition of Attlee, collective security, parliamentary democracy. And that's why those of us who've spent decades in the party feel so uncomfortable with it now. As my partner Fiona put it the other day, having grown up with many Jewish friends, reflecting on anti-Semitism, I honestly never thought I'd actually feel ashamed to be Labour. Now, I find it very hard to imagine I could ever vote anything but Labour. I find it incredible I could even write that sentence, but the fact that I can is a test of itself. But they don't make it easy. When I said to Ed Miliband recently that the Corbynista problem was that they were too sectarian, he said, "But aren't you a bit sectarian too?" And maybe he has a point. We do need to accept Corbyn has done things we didn't, making this a mass membership party, giving that sense of boldness to many younger people who felt that our politics lacked radicalism, doing better at the general election than many of us expected. And though we can complain at the lack of new ideas, we have to include ourselves in that as well. But in their sectarianism, I believe they dismiss as our sectarianism any genuine concerns we raise. We've had the Brexit tests. Now, here are the tests I think have to be applied before the country, for all the awfulness of this government, decide to make the change to Labour. This is not some old Blairite saying what he wants to change, though I do, but a candid assessment of the questions I believe people Labour need to win over, not the true believers, are asking now. Amid a politics that feels broken when, as at a public meeting I did in the North East last week, I asked for hands up anybody who thinks Theresa May is doing a good job, and not one single hand went up. Then, hands up if you think Jeremy Corbyn will be the next Prime Minister. One hand. That is unsustainable. So here's the 10 tests I think the country will apply. 1, can we imagine Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister in these difficult, dangerous times, able to handle the pressures, the workload, and above all, the tough, unavoidable decisions that have to be made every day, every hour? 2, can we see on the front bench the strength in depth, a team capable of forming a strong government? 3, are they focused absolutely on winning power for people in the country, or more concerned about power in the party? 4, do they have an understanding of the modern world, its challenges, and the practical policies needed to meet them? A programme to extend and strengthen our public services other than simply to promise more money without changing them for the better. 5, are they shaping ideas for a new and better future, including leading on the ethical dimensions of technological advance and artificial intelligence, or running arguments about the past? 6, vital, are we confident they'll make the right calls, guided by the right instincts in foreign policy crises, and genuinely stand up for universal human values, even when that means intervening to do so? 7, have they done the right thing to serve the country on Brexit, or at a minimum enough to stop the wrong thing being done? 8, does the party leadership actually want to be inclusive, to build the new support base needed to win power, earn votes from disillusioned Tory voters as well as Liberals, Nationalists, Greens and none of the above, while sustaining the backing of Labour people? 9, do they actually want the support and involvement of people who actively supported the Blair-Brown governments, or do they want to keep joining the Tories and the right-wing media in running them down? 10, are we persuaded that they see anti-Semitism in the party as a truly dreadful thing and are doing what's needed to be done to stamp it out? Now, I know already, having said some of this on the Today programme this morning, it will provoke the Oh Jeremy Corbyn fan club to troll away, to say this is division caused by us old has-beens, that's what's damaging the party, that if only we could show him the kind of support that they do, the country would see how marvellous he and his policies are, all would be well, and P.S., what about Iraq? But the questions are real. because they are being asked and they're being answered mainly in the negative by people who support Labour must win. Bad results have nothing to do with expectations, and it is, dare I say, nothing but spin, and not very good spin to say so. They are about the real views of real people, and you have to heed the very real message that we are a divided country, and neither of the parties are currently trusted to heal those divisions. That the government is neither liked nor respected, yet Labour is not seen as a viable alternative. To say that is not to undermine the leadership. It's to ask the whole party, from Jeremy Corbyn and his team down, to face up to the scale of the challenge ahead and understand it will not be met by blind loyalty, but blunt analysis and proper, realistic, believable policy solutions to the huge problems that we face. I have no doubt whatever about my abiding convictions of democratic socialism, no doubt that collective action, contribution and provision are the best means of securing individual security, liberty, prosperity. No doubt there are wonderful Labour people everywhere, all over the country, young and old, serving their communities. All my doubts relate to the course now being followed, and because it is such a huge issue, which will determine so much of our kids' futures, the approach being taken to Brexit. The only time I feel genuinely optimistic these days is when I go to Burnley games and to schools and colleges, when I spend time with my kids and people of their age, and I feel that they know the way in which the country is being led is so lame, and they give me a sense that they have the energy and the passion to change it. But this sense that our politics is broken, that the current political situation is unsustainable, cannot be indefinitely ignored. Now, as with Alison, every day somebody will stop me and say, when are we going to get a new party? And like her, I don't think that is the answer. Not least because of the danger it would help secure a big majority for a truly dreadful Tory government, and also hand our party forever to people and to a politics that if they refuse even to try to answer those 10 questions, ultimately cannot, will not win. So we, my generation, have to do what we can to stop the madness of Brexit, to urge the Labour Party to take the right course. But the next generation of people, and above all the next generation of ideas, that's what's needed right now. We Labour, we Britain. So, I really do think it's time to get real. Let nobody take comfort from tiny leads against a stumbling, fumbling, drifting, divided, leaderless government. Let's stop anyone pretending all is well. Let's stop the feeble response to anti-Semitism and treat it as the evil we all know it to be. Let's expose the risks and the costs, the lies, the cheating, the possibility of criminality in Brexit, in floodlights, full on. And let's admit that the scale of policy challenge is not remotely being met by the policy response, so engage in that with greater energy and urgency too. Many, not the few, was just 1/3 of the new Labour mantra from this week 21 years ago when we won our first term. The other 2/3 of the mantra are just as relevant and just as needed today. Leadership, not drift. And, most important of all, future, not the past. Always. Fight for a Labour Party that can deliver that future, because it is needed now more than ever. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Hey.
Tour de force.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was quite brilliant. We have just about enough time. Hi, Ben Bradshaw, waving over there. Round of applause for Ben Bradshaw. We have just about enough time for a round of questions. Hands are shooting up already, so I will take some. I will be taking an equal number of questions from men and women. So, women in the room, I'll just start volunteering you at random, if you don't put your hand up. So, let's begin. Yeah, the person there to my left, that's lovely. And the gentleman just here with the blue shirt on, yeah. I'll take a few. So the lady here, the gentleman there, Heather at the front, and the gentleman there with the beard. There we go. Yes, you, sir. Okay, let's go for those four, and then depending on how succinct people are and how interested Alastair is in the questions, we'll take some more. Okay, go for it.
Hi, Councillor Lisa Baines from Sheffield and one of our NEC candidates. I'm going to pretend that woo was for Sheffield. Okay, in communities...
Lisa. It was for you.
Yeah, thank you. And Sheffield. In communities like the ones I represent in Sheffield, the one I represent and also my home, a very, very large percentage of people voted for Leave. They had concerns about immigration that were genuine. On the doorstep, they were called racist by Momentum, which was extremely unhelpful. How can we break through that? Because now they feel like they're being attacked if we try and persuade them the other way on Brexit. How can we break through that?
Great question.
Thanks for speaking here this morning, Alastair. Jesse from Calder Valley CLP. Firstly, do you think, as someone who's worked in politics for a long time, do you think British elections are still one in the centre ground, or do you think they can be one at an extremity? In 2015, obviously, Ed Miliband had a slightly to the left political platform, and the Tories kind of drifted to the right, and we saw an interesting result there. And also, there's been sort of murmured rumours of another party, a bit like the SDP in the radical centre ground. Apparently, they've fundraised a lot of money and have a lot of prominent backers. Do you think that would ever be viable? So yeah, those two questions, please. Thank you.
Okay.
2 questions. Good job I'm feeling generous this morning.
Heather Pito, also standing for the NEC. We've had some terrible results in Derby, the East Midlands, with the Labour Party. But although it's a Leave area, I do feel very optimistic that if we actually address Brexit and we have a pro-Remain argument that says how we will deliver in areas like Derby, etc., the regional infrastructure, we can actually turn things around. And although Momentum is, quite vicious in their attitude, Momentum is becoming inertia. People are starting to see that actually it's a few within Momentum who are trying to tell the young people and the moderate people within Momentum how they should behave. And I think we can actually win those arguments.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Hugh, East Leicestershire. Morning. Right, okay, we've got fan mail. We've got fan mail from a Mr. J. Landsman. He reaches out. He says, right now we need unity. Thank you, John. He goes on to say, but the bitterness of progress who have never accepted their own contributory failures and mistakes have other priorities today. So, question. While I went out to the toilet, have you changed all our priorities? Because I'm pretty sure it was ensuring a Labour government.
Yeah.
Or is John Landsman wrong?
Alastair.
Okay. Right, so basically 2 on Brexit, 1 on the Centre Party, and 1 on is John Landsman wrong. I think on the new party, I think if you get if you're going to launch a new party, don't make your main point of argument about how much money you've got. I think a political party is actually about having the values and the principles and the policies that help you deliver change. I also think people mention the SDP a lot. Now, obviously, there are some very good, strong MPs in Parliament. But if you look back to the SDP and the foundation of the SDP, it was founded by what would be defined as 4, frankly, political giants set alongside a lot of the people that we see in politics today. And ultimately, they failed. Now, you could argue that it had an impact in changing the party and what have you, but I think net result to me was, I think they probably gave the Tories longer than they get. Our system is very different. I mentioned Macron in my introduction, and people keep saying, why can't we find a Macron? Well, the thing about France is that they elect the president and then they elect the parliament and the president chooses the government. It's a totally different system. And I do think if this goes on and on and on, then this political scenario does become unsustainable. But the point about winning or losing in the centre ground, I think these terms are becoming more redundant. But I also think that one of the reasons why we seem to be getting coalition governments is because actually the public is sensing that politics, I think social media's had a big impact on this, politics is moving to extremes. And actually the public don't like, in the main, the public do not like extremes. Now, so whether that means you win or lose in the centre ground, I don't know. But I don't think you win by pursuing policies that can be identified by your opponents and by the media and, most importantly, by the public as being extreme. On Brexit, listen, I go to Burnley a lot. Burnley was really, really, big on the Leave front, although it's really fascinating now because we're all spent all our time singing about the fact that we love the fact that we're going into Europe. But as we shall be doing at the Emirates tomorrow. But I do think that neither of the main parties has been giving leadership on this. Yeah. And I think one of you can read, for Boris Johnson to come out and say that the Tories did so well, brackets they didn't, because they had a hard position on Brexit, and this will now absolutely guarantee that we're not doing the customs union that Theresa May wants. Nonsense. They should be looking at why did so few people vote. We, definitely, the Labour Party, should be looking at why there were places, anti-Semitism definitely part of it, but Brexit, Labour's position on Brexit, there's no doubt in some areas that has lost support. I think a few months ago I wrote a letter, for 2 letters I did for The Guardian, one from Theresa May, one from Jeremy Corbyn. It was sort of fantasy politics, but I felt a lot better after it. Basically, what I felt they should say to the public. And they both reached the same conclusion, which is that leadership is about confronting the country with the difficult choices that it faces. Yes, we've had Brexit. Yes, we had a referendum. Democracy did not stop on 23rd of June 2016. We now have a Prime Minister who absolutely knows this is going to be bad for the country. She has to say that. She can't just sort of sit there and use it as a kind of party management thing to hold the party together. And I do believe, yes, there are lots of people who, if Brexit didn't happen, they would be very, very angry. They'd never trust politics again. But we have so much anger now. Anyway, we have so many people saying they don't trust politics again. I think a party that stood up and said, we're saying this now because it's the right course for the country to take. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's why we're going to do it. And that's why we're going to put it back to you on the deal. People's vote on the final Brexit deal, I think that would become a winning position for the party that did it. But, and including in the north, provided you can persuade them that the Brexit being pursued by the government is going to make the challenges that they face in their life worse, not better, which happens to be true. And therefore, if you can get to a position, Tony Blair, people can say what they like about Tony Blair, he always used to say, the closest you can get to the truth in any situation, you're starting from the best possible starting point. What is the truth about Brexit? It's a disaster. That is the truth about Brexit. Why is that not being remotely reflected in Parliament and the debate? And that's why people are bowing to fatalism. They don't see a way out. They don't hear a way out. They think, fed up of hearing about it, let's just get on with it. Now, on the unity. Listen, I'm a great believer in unity. I spent my whole time in the Labour Party, both as a journalist and then working for Tony and for Gordon and etc., preaching unity and the importance of unity. But you have to have strategy and policies around which you can build that unity. And if you sometimes feel, as I do, I mentioned this in my remarks, I had an absolute eureka moment when I did Question Time a couple of years ago now. Anna Soubry was on the panel, and so was John McDonnell. And Anna Soubry had a right go at John McDonnell, to the point that I felt she's going a bit over the top here. And don't
She does
ask,
sometimes.
She does. And don't ask me what it triggered in John McDonnell, but he had a right go at me about it. And that was the moment where I thought, do you know what? These guys hate us more than they hate them. Now, and unity, if you're the leader, if you're in the position of leadership, you're the one who can reach out to people. You're the one who has the power and the capacity to build bridges. It's why I said in those tests, do they want to? Do they want Tories to vote for them? Because if Tories don't vote for them, they're not going to win. I hope they understand that.
Okay, we have time I'm just going to do one more round of questions. Now, people are going to think, right, I'm biased in favour of our NEC candidates. And they'd be right. Mary Wimbury, there. And how could I not? Arjun at the front, this gentleman at the front here, and Ashley there in the middle. There we go.
I think you failed on your men and women thing.
I haven't.
I think you have.
Even Stevens, that was.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see.
Thanks very much.
I mean, I'm fine being held to account for my feminism. Absolutely. Very.
Mary Wimbury. Alastair, I'd like to say I got the 5:43 train down from North Wales to hear you this morning, and it was worth it.
Good.
You talked at the end there about truth, and you also talked in your remarks about social media and were progressives beating nationalists and populists. And I think one of the issues we've got to deal with is how we do that when they don't care about the truth. And my teenage son said to me last night, he got involved in an argument about, interpreting the election results, how we'd done, etc. And he said, I've pointed out to these people that their figures are wrong. And I was brought up to think, if people point out your figures are wrong, you should look at something again. And they're just not doing that. But actually, they've decided emotionally that they agree with an argument. And actually, if you take away some facts, well, they can find some other facts, possibly false, to back them up. How do we argue with that?
Yeah, not easy.
It is difficult. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Arjun Mitra. I'm a councillor in Barnet. Thank you. I'm not sure we deserve that. Some of my best friends lost their council seats yesterday, and I think yesterday was one of the worst days of my life. Anti-Semitism is destroying the Labour Party in Barnet, and actually one of the biggest problems we have in tackling it locally is that, relating to the previous question, is that a lot of our members subscribe to all of this fake news. We've got one local member named Jenny Manson, who is the Momentum candidate for Finchley and Golders Green. God help us. We have people like that who give cover to these anti-Semites and who believe the fake news rather than what we're telling them and what the Jewish community is telling them. How on earth do we get through to these people and make them understand, short of throwing them out of the party?
Thanks, Henry.
So, Kieran Lenhan at Hove and Portslade, CLP. So, I run my own university Labour club, and the two biggest things about that signifies our membership is that they're very left-wing and they're very pro-European, but they seem to not understand that it sort of contradicts one another, and they when you sort of explain to it, they sort of go, oh yeah, but Jeremy Corbyn's more important than staying in the European Union. And I just wanted your opinions on that.
Okay. Where's Ashley? Yeah, Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Dalton, and I'm the PPC for Rochford and Southend East. And that's kind of connected to what I want to say. In the last couple of weeks, months, we've been running local elections. We actually did far better than we thought we'd do. Well, it's from a very low base in Southend, but we made 2 gains from the Tories. What's really struck me locally is that we're seeing this kind of break off. So I've got this kind of really small core group of Momentumite folk that won't deliver a leaflet, that won't knock on a door, that think that, painting the walls of the Labour office red is what's going to turn everybody in Southend into a socialist. But, seriously. But on the other side of that, I've just seen loads of Momentum members in Rochford and Southend East get involved in their first ever election. The new members, they've never done it before, and they loved it. We had them out on the streets, we had them getting out the vote, we had them working really hard for Labour candidates in Rochford and Southend East. What I'm worried about now is how do we harness that and keep it and get those people still working for Labour success, whilst at the same time making sure that we do what I think is really important, and you touched upon, Alastair, which is tackling this sort of dearth of ideas, because it's not just Momentum that haven't been thinking hard enough. I think as progressives, we spent the last 10 years being far too lazy about our ideas and assuming that everybody else is with us. We must reinvigorate our thinking. How do we do that in CLPs and across the country, whilst at the same time maintaining and motivating this new membership?
Fantastic. Help us, Obi-Wan.
What did I say at the start about how one or two of you, judging by social media, are looking to give you all the answers to our political problems? I admire your trust. Sorry if I disappoint you. Social media, let's start with that one. I do think there's something going on that is a real problem for the world. And unless there is a kind of a backlash against it sometime soon, I think it's going to change democracy for the worse forever. And that is the fact that we have in the White House now somebody who literally will lie with total and complete impunity and get away with it because they knew they were electing a liar. And then you've got Putin, who plays the same game. I think that we all do it to some extent, in that we all gravitate to, why do we feel more comfortable here than we would at a Momentum meeting or a meeting of the Tory party? Because we're with our tribes. I talked about tribalism earlier. But I think, and social media has exacerbated that. We tend to go to the place where we'll get the opinions that we want because they conform to what we already think. And I think what you can do as an individual, I do try to do this, I think you really do have to make an effort not to do that. You really do have to make an effort to read stuff that you don't like, to listen to people that you don't agree with, and to try to kind of hear what they're saying. Angela Merkel made she made a speech about this a while back. Now she doesn't tweet, she doesn't do social media, what have you, but she talked about this thing about the algorithmization of life, that we're all being driven without knowing it to a lack of understanding about the world because we only live in our little narrow bit. And that is a real danger. And it's something that the Trumps and the Farages and the Johnsons and what have you, and the Corbynistas, they've adopted, they've deployed that. Now, I'm not criticising them for that because, you play on the landscape that you've got, you engage on the battlefield that you've got. So I think there's this sense that Instagram, Twitter, it all comes along and we say, isn't that lovely? We can put a picture of the dog out there and people can go, and it's all nice. But over there's this much darker thing going on that I think we're only just beginning to realise the impact of it. So if we don't change. I don't know the answer to how you deal with it, but if we don't find a way to deal with it, I think that we're in a real problem with democracy. And I find one of the things I find absolutely incredible, I was a journalist during the sort of Thatcher-Reagan years, and I've often wondered, if there had been even the slightest hint of a Russian government getting involved in an American election, it would have been the end of any candidate that was benefiting from that. Absolutely. And yet that's happened, and it doesn't seem to have damaged him. And I suspect there's a lot more of it to come out about Brexit and that as well, by the way. So big challenge. Don't quite know how we meet it, but if we don't, we're knackered. On the, the stuff about Barnet, I mean, what needs to be said about Barnet is that the people like you and the people who were standing for election were absolutely, totally clear and unequivocal in their position about anti-Semitism. And that is a classic example of where a failure of leadership has led to the situation that you described yesterday. And that has to be admitted, not denied. And that means that when you talk about people who give cover to anti-Semitism, that is as bad as anti-Semitism. That is bad as avowed, open expression of anti-Semitism. Therefore, they have to be called out and they have to be dealt with. And if you can't deal with them, it means you don't want to. And if you don't want to, the public are going to make a very, very harsh judgment about that, because it says something about the sort of politics that you've traded in all your life. And people aren't stupid. They work things out. And they work things out on the big moments. And this anti-Semitism is rumbled on now for 2 years and not been dealt with. Just as now, these results, you watch all day today, they'll be saying, people like me causing division, they're actually a lot better than people are saying, and if we carry on like this, we'll be fine. We won't be fine. And you don't get to being fine unless you actually confront the truth. University, and this thing about, on the one hand, young people saying we like Jeremy Corbyn, on the other hand, saying we want to stay in the European Union, it doesn't seem to be doing much. I'm sorry, put it back to you. You've got to activate and motivate and mobilise, and you've got to win arguments. You've got to win arguments. And I do think there's something very, very strange about this. People used to say around Tony was a kind of cult of personality. It wasn't at all. And Tony was surrounded by people.
It was a little bit.
No.
I was 16 at the time. It definitely wasn't.
No, but what I mean by... No, wait a minute. No, what I mean... Let me tell you what I mean is that Tony was a very powerful personality, and a lot of it was about him. But he was surrounded by people, not least his core team, who challenged him all the time.
And Frank Dobson
and
in
the
his first cabinet.
And he welcomed that and wanted that, because he knew that if you're just being told you're right the whole time and everything's wonderful, and why can't everybody see you like we do, you don't win like that. So he wanted us to challenge him all the time. It wasn't a cult of personality. It was a very, very strong team. And then finally, my handwriting's getting really bad here. Local elections, and I can't read the word I've written down. It says blues, get the vote, get out the vote. What was that about?
That was about...
yeah. Oh, yeah, but I wrote down blue and red paint. Yeah. How do you keep them? I think it's the same as anything. Look, we've both said, and I'm sure there's a feeling in the room for other people here, when people... Motivation, why are we sometimes more motivated than others? It's because of how we feel. So you have to get that motivation now and say, look, you've enjoyed that, therefore, we're going to get you to do more. And therefore, that's going to give you more time to spend with them, to be able to sort of, work together to da-da-da-da-da. And then they go and get their people in as well. I'll tell you the one thing I think about, the one thing I do think about social media and its impact on politics that is, you go back to the Obama campaign, the first Obama campaign, the power of social media was actually in the human networking that it led to. And I think this relates as well to this thing about how do you deal with truth and lack of and fake news and all this stuff that's going on. People don't believe mainstream media. They don't believe biased media. They don't believe politicians like they did. They don't believe priests. They don't believe doctors. They don't believe teachers. People don't believe anybody. Who do we believe? We believe each other. And that's the power of campaigning and networking. So actually, if you, and this is where Momentum do it, you know, you have to, hands up in terms of the sort of capacity they built. If you've got a human network that big, you're reaching a lot of people. Now, my point is, I think, and I think Trump will find this eventually, if you are actually based on really kind of horrible values and you lie a lot, eventually that has to run out of road. So if you can do that without lying and with good values, I think that is a very, very good way to think about modern campaigning.
Fantastic. Now,
Did I?
a round of applause for Southend. Now, we have run out of time for more questions, but everyone will be very relieved to know that Alastair is doing a book signing later on.
Always got my diaries. Have diaries, will travel.
Absolutely, and as I was saying, Alastair's now one of our most important political diarists, so if you want to continue the chat, then get over there to the book signing. We have a packed agenda today. We have some very exciting events, and Richard Angel will be just so shocked if I don't mention the fact that one of our next events is the Progressive Britain Podcast Live. Hurrah.
Ooh.
It's great. But before we do that, firstly, I just want to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, once more, we've had a fantastic, insightful speech and question and answer session. Would you just join me one more time in thanking our keynote?